Joining us now is Hilary Fordwich, President and founder of Strelmark. Hilary, thank you for joining us. I have to start with the news today that there has been a major security breach in the Trump administration after a journalist was added to an encrypted online chat with government officials. The Atlantic magazine's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, was included on a message chain in which top Trump administration officials, including J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth and Mike Waltz, were discussing recent strikes against the Houthi terror group in Yemen. Now, a National Security Council spokesperson confirmed that the messages sent through the app Signal appear to be authentic. He said that they're investigating how the number was accidentally added to the chain, but it's pretty huge news. Can I get your reaction to this?
Well, good evening. And Gabriella, pleasure to be back with you again. Thank you for having me. I think this is an absolutely ghastly gaffe, but we don't have any explanations from it yet. We don't know whether it's sabotage, but it's highly unusual for such a gaffe to take place from anybody who's loyal to the Trump administration. And so obviously, this is somebody who doesn't want the Trump administration to succeed and actually probably doesn't want peace in the world. So we might speculate as to what sort of leanings that particular individual who, it's made this happen has. But right now, we don't have any more facts, and I'd rather not speculate further than say it was a ghastly gaffe.
It's very concerning. Let's talk about Russia and Ukraine. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has downplayed concerns that a deal with Russia could embolden Putin. Speaking with Fox News, he says he doesn't see that Putin is someone who is trying to take over Europe. This is what he had to say.
I just don't see that he wants to take all of Europe. This is a much different situation than it was in World War II. In World War II, there was no NATO. So you have countries that are armed there. To me, it just does. I take him at his word in this sense. So, and I think the Europeans are beginning to come to that belief too.
The US is still hoping that a ceasefire in Russia's war with Ukraine can be reached within weeks, and the White House is aiming for a truce agreement by April 20. Hilary, what's your assessment of where this is at the moment? How likely is it that we could see a truce agreement by April 20?
Well, I think the very good news, Gabriella, and the whole world, and I can't imagine why anyone would think it's not beneficial to be at least talking. The previous administration didn't even. So you do need to have talks. You do need to be negotiating.
Absolutely.
You do need to have. Of course, yes. And I would say that, basically NATO and the West has broken their word ever since 1991 and keeps encroaching and moving and constantly breaking their word. I'm not in any way validating or in any way sort of saying that anything Putin's done is particularly correct or humane, but we must look at both sides of the story. And I think one of the very wise things Steve Witkoff said, he said in his 68 years of negotiating all sorts of deals and things, he said there's always two sides to a story. And that's what I'd say. I would actually, though, quote one of the things that Putin said many years ago. He said that he thought perestroika, which was the dismantling of the Soviet Union, he thought perestroika was one of the worst things that ever happened to Mother Russia. So he very much does want Russia as a whole. What is interesting, and I think the biggest question, Gabriella, that not many people are talking about is, how come there's this $1.2 billion ski resort being built by the Ukrainians? So it's a little bit strange. And the last but not least, billions is going from European countries, as we know, to the war. And the UK just actually approved billions. Meanwhile, pensioners are starving. The economy is tanking. It's absolutely amazing to come up with these billions and sending potentially British boys to die.
Absolutely. Let's talk about investment in the United States. We're seeing more companies and countries investing in America as part of Trump's effort to bring manufacturing back. Today, South Korea-based Hyundai and Donald Trump announced a $20 billion investment in the US, onshoring, which includes a $5 billion steel plant in Louisiana. So since Trump took office on January 20, investments have totaled almost $3 trillion US, which is a huge figure. I suppose is this latest one considered a win?
Yes, absolutely. It's a huge amount of money in just such a very short amount of time. What I would say is all of his policies are geared to, when he talks about America first, there's nothing wicked about wanting to reshore American companies. Actually, President Obama, when he raised the corporate tax rate to 21%, countries like, for example, Ireland, they lowered their corporate tax rate to 12%. what happened? Well, obviously, who says they want to pay 21% versus 12%? So 997 US companies, Gabriella, are now headquartered in Ireland. So they have all the money, they have all the jobs. Yes, what Donald Trump has done is he has enacted policies that have encouraged US companies to come back and reshore, and also, yes, for foreign investment. It's total 3 trillion so far. Watch for it to go higher.
And it's 3 trillion in such a short amount of time. It's going to be so interesting to watch what happens by the end of the year. Over in the UK, though, it is a totally different situation. The UK Labor government is accused of being anti-business, surprise, surprise. But GB News reports that more than 200,000 businesses have folded since Labor took power. That is a bleak picture for jobs and investment under the current government. What's your assessment?
Oh, absolutely, Gabriella. To my point just now about corporate tax rates. Well, corporate tax rates are one thing. What about individual tax rates as well? It's reported that every 45 minutes, a millionaire leaves the UK. Why wouldn't they? If you're more of your money that you've made taken away from you. So I think that's absolutely a ghastly statistic. And yes, one of the things in the UK, by the way, the Labour government, I don't believe, and I could be wrong, but I don't even think one member of the Labour government has ever run a business. And I'm always saying in the US, Gabriella, that we should have a constitutional amendment that in order to hold public office, you should have had to have made payroll and run a business so you understand where money comes from.
Wouldn't that be good?
Wouldn't that be lovely if politicians actually knew how to run a business? And I think that's back to tying all these stories together, back to the 3 trillion of reshoring. That is because there are business people running the government now. If you don't have and you don't make money, you have nothing to tax when you drive away businesses and taxes. So the Chancellor of the Exchequer over there, Rachel Reeves, that's what she's doing. She's absolutely driving away millionaires, driving away businesses. And you're absolutely right about the 203,000 businesses that have folded, and many more are actually leaving. So many of them coming to the US.
Yes, they are. Finally, Hilary, I need to get your thoughts on Canada. Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has called for a snap election scheduled for next month. So the move to dissolve Parliament comes during increased tensions with the US after Trump issued tariffs. This is what he had to say.
We are facing the most significant crisis of our lifetimes because of President Trump's unjustified trade actions and his threats to our sovereignty. Our response must be to build a strong economy and a more secure Canada. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen.
It's interesting, Mark Carney still hasn't had a phone call with Donald Trump, and that might not happen until after the election. What do you make of all this? It's interesting because Trump hasn't even mentioned Carney's name yet. Where's the relationship heading between Canada and the US?
Well, a few things here. Number one, it will be very interesting to see when the Canadian public are all very aware of the fact when he was at Brookfield Asset Management, he actually sent millions of Canadian dollars and thousands of Canadian jobs down to Manhattan, to New York, out of Canada to the US. I wonder why he did that. Gosh, that wasn't very Canadian. Really, was it? He also sent thousands of jobs down into the coal mining area with some other deals that he was involved in. So he was making money for other people and certainly not for Canadians. So hopefully a lot of that will become public. Another thing is that the election, of course, is on April 28th. He's actually called for the election, very interestingly, Gabriella, in the shortest amount of time that is allowed by law there. Why? I think it's 36 days. He called it within 37 days. Why? Because their polling right now has actually improved the Liberals. It was so bad that, of course, resigned. But why is it better? Because a lot of Canadians are hearing all that Trump is saying, and they're not getting quite the full story. Don't forget, all Trump is asking for is fair, reciprocal tariffs. They've been tariffing the US for that amount. So they're not seeing both sides of the story. And also, no, President Trump didn't say that Canada isn't a real country. What he did say, which is true, is they don't even pay for their own security. The US is paying for their security. What President Trump has said is that if they were part of the US, they would be more secure with a better economy and they'd all lead better lives. And those are actually all pretty true.
Hilary Fordwich, it is brilliant to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Brilliant to be with you too. Thank you, Gabriella.